Let's take it slow tonight. Find the softest way to lie, let the pillow take the weight of your head, and let your breath get long and easy, the way it does when you finally stop bracing for something. There is nothing in this story you have to hold on to. It's a gentle one, a slow one, a story you can rest inside of, and it ends kinder than it starts. So loosen your hands, let the day drift off down the road, and let me do the walking for a while. I want to tell you about the summer I finally went home, about a little town called Cedar Gap, up where the North Georgia hills start folding themselves toward the Blue Ridge, that I ran away from when I was 19 years old. I stayed gone from it for 20 years. And then one June, I drove back down that red dirt road, both hands tight on the wheel, dead certain that every soul in that town had spent 2 whole decades thinking the very worst of me. What was actually waiting at the end of that road was nothing at all like the thing I'd braced myself against. My name is Emily Calloway, though for a long time in the city I just went by Calloway, the way you do when a first name feels like it belongs to a person you used to be. I make my living putting old buildings back together. That's the plain way to say it. The fancy way is architectural restoration. And I've spent near about 20 years of my life down in Savannah, coaxing 100-year-old courthouses and churches and grand old homes back from the edge of ruin, one rotted sill and one flaking cornice at a time. I'm good at it. I say that not to brag, but because it matters to the story. People hand me something broken and beloved, something the years have been unkind to, and I find the good bones still under the damage, and I bring it back. I can read a crack in a plaster wall like a doctor reads an X-ray. I know how to save a thing that everybody else has already written off. And it took me the better part of my life to notice the joke sitting right there in the middle of it. That I could do all that for strangers, for buildings I'd never set foot in before, and never once turn the same care on the one door I'd left swinging open behind me when I was a girl. I learned to fix things in that store before I could spell my own name. My grandfather first, then my father, standing me up on an overturned milk crate behind the counter so I could reach the register, teaching me the bins of screws sorted finer than a jeweler sorts stones, teaching me the patient way you talk a nervous customer through a problem until the fear goes out of their shoulders. I thought I'd left all of that behind when I left Cedar Gap. I thought I'd traded up, gone off to do something finer than sell washers and cut keys by hand. It took me 20 years and a saved courthouse and a whole city full of rescued buildings to understand that I never learned one single thing down in Savannah that I hadn't first learned on that milk crate, in that smell, under that bell. I'd just been doing it to strangers' houses instead of my own. To understand why I ran, you have to understand my mother. Her name was Franny, and she was the warm center that the whole of my childhood turned around. She kept a garden that embarrassed the neighbors with how good it was. She sang low under her breath doing the dishes. She had a laugh that started somewhere down deep and took its time getting out. And when she aimed it at you, you felt chosen. My daddy, Roy, loved her the way the tide loves the moon, quiet and total and without any need to announce it. And then, the winter I was 18, she got sick. It was the slow kind, the kind that gives you time, which people always say like it's a mercy, and sometimes it is, and sometimes the time is just a longer hallway to walk down toward the same closed door. I stayed. Of course I stayed. I deferred the college I'd gotten into, the one 300 miles south with the good program, and I learned how to change sheets on a bed with someone still in it, and how to crush a pill into applesauce, and how to sit in a dim room and read out loud past the point where anyone was still listening. She died that spring, when the dogwoods were out. We buried her up the hill behind the little white First Baptist church at the end of Main Street, and half the town came, and there were so many casseroles in our kitchen that we ran the second refrigerator out in the carport for a month. And then, everybody went back to their own lives, the way they have to, and the house went quiet, and my father and I were left standing in it, like two people who'd forgotten how to be in a room that didn't have her in it. I lasted 3 months. That's the part I carried for 20 years like a stone sewn into the lining of my coat. 3 months after we put my mother in the ground, On a grey morning at the very end of that summer, I got on a bus before the sun was even up, and I left. I didn't make a speech about it. I left a note on the kitchen table under the sugar bowl, and I took one duffel bag, and I rode that bus south into a life my mother had wanted for me and my father had blessed. And I told myself I would come back once the breathing got easier. I just never did the math on how many years, once it got easier, could quietly become. Here is the thing I believed, the thing I built the next 20 years on top of, brick by brick. I believed I had abandoned him. I believed I had done the lowest thing a person can do, which is to leave someone alone in the exact place where the grief is loudest, and save my own self, and call it college. And I believed that a town like Cedar Gap, where everybody knows everybody's business before breakfast, had watched me do it, and had drawn the obvious conclusion, and had filed me away forever under the heading of the girl who ran out on poor Roy Calloway when his wife was barely cold. You'd think, believing that, I'd have hurried back to prove it wrong. But shame doesn't work that way. Shame builds walls, not bridges. The longer I stayed gone, the taller the wall got, and the taller the wall got, the more impossible the coming back became, until home wasn't a place anymore, so much as a locked room in the back of my chest that I'd taught myself not to walk past. We talked, my father and I. Don't picture some total silence, some clean cut. We talked on the phone every couple of weeks for 2 decades, the way people do who love each other and don't have the first idea how to say so. He would ask if I was eating. I'd say, yes, sir. I'd ask about the store, and he'd say it was still standing. And there'd be a pause where all the real things lived, unspoken. And then one of us would let the other one go. And every single time, before he hung up, he'd say the same thing. He'd say, "Don't you worry about us down here, sugar. You go on and live." I took that as him not needing me. That's the cruelest little trick my mind played, and I only see it now. For 20 years I heard, "You go on and live," as a door closing gently, as my father telling me it was fine, they were fine, no need to come. I heard release as distance, and so I released myself, right back out into my busy, important life, and I let another year go by, and another, and the pecan trees on Persimmon Street put out 20 springs of leaves that I wasn't there to see. It was my brother Wes who finally reeled me in. Wes is 4 years younger than me, and where I ran, he stayed. He never left Cedar Gap at all. He went to work in the store beside our daddy, the way our daddy had gone to work beside his, and he married a local girl and put down the kind of roots I'd spent my whole adult life pretending I didn't have. We were never close after I left. How could we be? But that April he called me, and his voice had something new in it, something careful. "Dad's turning 70 in June," Wes said. "We're doing a thing for him. Nothing big. Well, it's Cedar Gap, so it'll be big, but you know what I mean." And then, after a pause that cost him something, he said, "Emily, he's 70. I'm not going to tell you what to do, I'm just telling you the number." I sat with the phone against my ear a long time after we hung up. 70. My father was going to be 70 years old, and I had missed 20 of those years on purpose. And there is a number where the excuses you've been living inside of finally stop fitting. The way a coat you loved stops fitting, and you stand there holding it, and you know. I told Wes I'd come. Then I spent 6 weeks terrified. So that's who was behind the wheel that June afternoon, driving up out of the flatland into the hills, with the windows down and the cicadas roaring in the trees like the whole county was frying. A woman of 39 who fixed broken things for a living and had let the most important thing in her life stay broken for half of it. I came up the last rise, and the town dropped down in front of me in its little green valley, the water tower and the church steeple, and the 2 blocks of brick storefronts around the square, and I had to pull over onto the shoulder because I couldn't see the road through my own eyes. Cedar Gap had not changed, and it had changed, the way a face you love does. The square was still the square, live oaks throwing their shade across the courthouse lawn, the little bandstand somebody was always meaning to repaint. The Piggly Wiggly still anchored the far corner, but there was a coffee place now where the shoe repair used to be, and the old movie house was some kind of church, and every third face I'd have known on sight had been swapped for a younger one I didn't. I drove around the square once, slow, my heart going like a rabbit, waiting for the first cold look, waiting for somebody to see the Callaway girl who ran and let me know they remembered. I had to eat. I'd been driving since dawn and my hands were shaking, and I was too early to go straight to the house, so I did the bravest, small thing I did all summer, which was park in front of the Bluebird and go in. The Bluebird has been the town's kitchen table since before I was born. A little diner with a Formica counter and a pie case and a bell on the door, and Miss Dot behind the register, the way there has always been a Miss Dot behind that register. She's got to be 80 now. She looked up when the door chimed, and I felt my whole body brace for it, for the flat stare, for the polite ice. "Well?" Miss Dot said, and her whole face folded up into 100 soft creases of pure delight. And she came around that counter faster than any woman near 80 ought to move, and she took my face in both her flour-dusted hands like I was a child, like I was her own. "Well, look who the good Lord finally sent us. Roy's girl. Emily, honey, your daddy is going to come apart at the seams." And she held me at arm's length and just beamed at me, and there was not one atom of judgment anywhere in it. And I stood there in the doorway of that little diner completely undone, because it was the exact opposite of everything I'd driven 300 miles bracing to receive. I want you to sit in that gap with me a second, because that gap is the whole story. The distance between the punishment I was so certain I had coming and the plate of warm peach cobbler Miss Dot set in front of me without my asking, on the house, for the road you drove. I ate it at the counter with tears running down into it, and she pretended not to notice, and she talked at me the whole time about nothing, about the weather and the new coffee place, and whose grandbaby had just started walking, and every so often she'd reach over and pat my hand like she was making sure I was still real. There was a moment that first afternoon, walking the 2 doors down from the diner, when I was sure it had finally come. A woman about my own age stopped short on the sidewalk when she saw me, her face going through something quick and complicated, and my whole body braced, because here it was at last, the cold look, the recognition. And then she said, "Emily? Emily Callaway?" and burst into tears and grabbed me, and it turned out to be Sherry Dill, who'd sat next to me in the 10th grade, and she wasn't cold at all. She was just overcome. I had gotten so good at bracing for the blow that I'd learned to read plain gladness as its opposite. I did that all week, flinched from the slap and got the embrace instead, until slowly, my body began to believe the town before my mind would let it. The hardware store was 2 doors down. Callaway Hardware, the same painted sign my grandfather hung, the same green awning, the same brass bell over the door that I could have picked out of 1,000 bells with my eyes shut. My grandfather hung that bell so he'd hear customers come in from the back room. My whole childhood is stitched through with the sound of it. I stood on the sidewalk outside a long moment, listening to it ring for other people going in and out, gathering myself, and then I pulled the door and walked into the smell of my entire childhood, cut keys and machine oil and cardboard and dust, and the bell rang over my head like it had been saving that particular note for me. There was an old yellow dog asleep in a patch of sun by the register. Not a dog I knew. My father had always had a dog in that store, a line of them stretching back through my life, and this one lifted his grey muzzle and thumped his tail twice on the plank floor, and a boy of maybe 17 behind the counter said, "That's Biscuit. He won't do a thing to you." And then my brother Wes came out of the back with a box of something in his arms and stopped dead when he saw me and set the box down slow, and we stood there in the middle of the store just looking at each other across a whole lot of years. "You came," Wes said. That was all. But his voice cracked right down the middle of those 2 little words, and my baby brother, 40 pounds heavier and grey at the temples, and a father himself now, came around the counter and put his arms around me and held on. And I felt something in my chest that had been clenched for 20 years let go all at once. So hard it almost hurt. "Where's Dad?" I managed to say into his shoulder. "House," Wes said. "Go on, he doesn't know you're coming today." I couldn't decide if it'd be worse to warn him or not. He pulled back and wiped his face with the flat of his hand and half laughed. "Go on, Em. Go home." I noticed the frame on my way out. I almost didn't, and then I did, and it stopped me cold. There by the register, hung on the wall where every single customer would see it a dozen times a year, was a newspaper article behind glass. A Savannah paper. A photograph of a courthouse I had spent 11 months of my life saving, its restored clock tower gold in the evening light, and beside it a smaller photo of me in a hard hat that I didn't even remember them taking. My father had cut that out of a paper that doesn't get delivered within 100 miles of Cedar Gap, which meant he had gone looking for it. He had framed his daughter's work and hung it by the cash register of a hardware store where he stood 6 days a week. And I had never known. I put my hand flat on the glass, and the boy said, "Mr. Roy tells everybody about that. Like, everybody." And I had to go sit in my car for a while before I could drive. The house on Persimmon Street was smaller than it lived in my memory, the way they always are. White clapboard gone a little soft. The 2 big pecan trees I'd climbed as a girl, throwing the whole front yard into green shade. And there, on the porch, running the length of it, was a swing I'd never seen before, hung on new chains, the wood oiled and dark. My father was in it. He had a glass of tea sweating on the rail beside him and a paperback western open on his knee. And he was 70 years old, and smaller than I remembered too. And when my tires crunched on the gravel, he looked up over his reading glasses, the way he'd looked up 1,000 times when I was a girl coming home late. And I watched the recognition go through him like a current. He stood up too fast. The book slid off his knee onto the porch boards, and he didn't reach for it. He came to the top of the steps and gripped the post there, and I got out of the car, and neither of us could make our legs cross that yard for a second. And then we both could at the same time. I don't have good words for it, and I'm not going to cheapen it by trying. My daddy held me in the front yard under the pecan trees, with the cicadas going and his whole body shaking. And the only thing he said, over and over, low into my hair, was, "There she is. There she is. There's my girl." The birthday was that Saturday, and Wes was right. It was Cedar Gap, so it was big. They did it in the fellowship hall behind the church, and it seemed like the entire town filed through. And here is where the thing I'd braced against all those years should have finally arrived. Right, in that crowded room, some cold shoulder, some tight little smile, somebody who remembered. It never came. What came instead, over and over, from person after person, in 100 small variations, undid me a little more each time. An old man I half remembered gripped my hand in both of his and said, "Your daddy is so proud of you he liked to bust. That courthouse, my word." A woman my mother's age cupped my cheek and said, "Franny would just glow, seeing you doing all that beautiful work down there. Just glow." The new young preacher, who'd never met me in his life, said, "Emily, Roy talks about you every single time I see him. I feel like I already know you." And I kept nodding and thanking them, and underneath the nodding, a strange, terrible, warm confusion was rising in me. Because none of these people were treating me like the girl who ran. Every last one of them was treating me like the town's own success story, sent out into the world with the whole of Cedar Gap's blessing, come home in glory. The strangest one came from a stooped man in a feed store cap I finally placed as Earl Tucker, who'd farmed the land next to ours my whole childhood. He held my hand too long, his eyes wet, and said, "I was there, you know. The morning it happened." I told him I didn't know what he meant. "The store, that first spring after your mama. A fella I won't name was running his mouth at the counter about you leaving. saying it ugly, and your daddy came around that register slow. He didn't holler. That wasn't Roy. He got up close and quiet and said, "I put that girl on the bus myself, and the next man to say her name in a small way is going to say it to my face." And nobody ever did. Not once in 20 years. Earl Tucker patted my hand. "Figured somebody ought to have told you that about your father. All this time, and I don't believe a soul ever did." It was Miss Dot, of all people, who finally said the thing plain. She'd cornered me by the sweet tea table late in the afternoon, and she was working on a plate of somebody's banana pudding, and she said, apropos of nothing, watching my father across the room, "You know, he never let a single one of us feel sorry for him. Not one time in 20 years. I said, careful. "What do you mean, Miss Dot?" And she looked at me like I'd asked why the sky was up. "Honey, when you left." She said it gentle, but she said it. "When you left, right after we lost your mama, well, you know this town. There was talk starting up. There's always talk. A girl leaves like that, folks are going to shape it into the ugliest thing it'll hold, because ugly is more fun to pass around than kind." She scraped her pudding. "And your daddy got out ahead of every bit of it. First person tried it in the store, he set them straight so fast their heads spun. Said it loud, said it to everybody. Said it so many times it just became the true thing, which is how it works around here." "Said what?" I asked, and my voice did not come out sounding like mine. I had gone very still on that folding chair, a paper cup of sweet tea forgotten in my hand, because I could feel some large shape turning over slow under the surface of what she was telling me. The way you feel a fish bump the line a half second before you understand you've hooked into something. Miss Dot set her spoon down in the banana pudding and gave me the whole of her soft attention. "Said he sent you." Miss Dot looked at me, and her old eyes were wet and steady. "Said it was his doing and Franny's, that they raised a girl too good to waste up in these hills, and they'd be hanged before they'd let their grief pin you here your whole life. Said your mama made him promise. He'd tell it in the diner, in the store, at church, at the filling station, anywhere two people were standing. I put her on that bus myself. Best thing I ever did. 20 years, honey. Every time your name came up, he got there first. And after a while, there wasn't any other story left. He didn't protect his own name. Lord knows he had the standing to. He spent it all protecting yours." I don't remember what I said to Miss Dot. I don't think I said anything. I remember the banana pudding and the paper tablecloth and the sound of my father's laugh somewhere across that room. And I remember the floor of my whole life quietly tilting, 20 years of certainty sliding off it into the dark. Because do you hear what she was telling me? Every phone call, every "you go on and live," every year I'd read as him not needing me, not missing me, not minding. It hadn't been distance at all. It had been the exact same gift he'd been handing the whole town on my behalf. Handed straight to me, and I'd been too buried in my own shame to unwrap it. He wasn't letting me go because he didn't care. He was letting me go over and over and over, at real cost to himself because he did. If you're still with me, still awake, drifting there in the dark, stay a little while longer, because I'll let you in on something about this story. The part where I found out what my father had done, that isn't the good part. Finding out is easy. Finding out takes one afternoon by a sweet tea table. The good part, the part that took me the whole rest of that long green summer, is the part where I finally let myself believe it and set the heavy thing down and stayed. That part is still coming, so breathe out, slow, and let's take the long way there together. I didn't say anything to my father that day. It was his birthday, and there were 100 people there, and some truths need an empty porch and the right light. But I couldn't leave at the end of the weekend the way I'd half planned to. Something in me had come loose that needed tending, and for the first time in 20 years, the locked room in the back of my chest was standing open, and I was afraid that if I drove back to Savannah, I'd only manage to shut it again. So I called the one restoration crew I trust and told them I was taking some time. and I stayed. I want to tell you about that summer slow, because it deserves slow. I stayed in my old bedroom, which my father had never once turned into an office or a gym or a place to put boxes, the way people do. He'd kept it a girl's room for 2 decades, my books still on the shelf, a horse poster gone soft at the corners, clean sheets on the bed like he'd known. I found that almost harder to bear than anything Miss Dot had said. That every so often over 20 years, a lonesome man had gone in and dusted a room for a daughter who never came, and made the bed, and shut the door soft, and gone on hoping. That first night home, I lay in my childhood bed and could not sleep. But it was a good kind of not sleeping. The house talked the way it always had. The tick of the water heater, the low hum of the window unit, the pecan branches brushing the shingles when the night breeze came up off the hills. Somewhere out past the yard, a whippoorwill called and called. And under all of it was that deep country quiet a city person forgets is even possible. A quiet with room in it. I heard my father's television murmuring down the hall, and then I heard it click off, and I heard his slow steps, and I heard him stop outside my door, the way a man stops when he cannot quite believe the light under it is real. He didn't knock. He stood there a moment, and then he went on to bed, and I lay in the dark and cried the easy kind of tears, the kind that do not hurt on the way out. I worked. That's how the men in my family have always loved each other, with our hands, side by side, not looking straight at it. And it turned out I still knew the language. The old house needed everything, and my father at 70 had stopped being able to get up on a ladder, and so I did what I'm good at. I stripped and rehung the sagging screen doors so they shut with the right, soft clap. I dug the rot out of the porch posts and splinted in new heart pine and painted them. I got up under the house in the red dirt and the spiders and fixed the floor that had always dipped by the kitchen. And my father sat in the swing he'd built and handed me tools and told me stories. And Wes came by after the store closed, and slowly, board by board, the 3 of us built something back that had nothing to do with the house. My father was a terrible helper and a wonderful one. He would hand me the wrong tool on purpose just to see whether I still knew the difference and cackle when I caught him. He would narrate my own work back to me, slower than I was doing it, exactly the way he had when I was 10 years old. "Now you want to pre-drill that or you'll splitter," he'd say, about a board I had already pre-drilled, and I would say, "Yes, sir," and drill the next one his way, just to give him the pleasure of it. For 20 years, I had been a woman who ran crews, who told grown men what to do all day long, and it was the sweetest thing in the world to be somebody's girl again for one summer, handing up nails, saying, "Yes, sir," letting him believe the porch got fixed on his good instruction. Maybe it did. Maybe that is exactly how it got fixed. I found her one afternoon, my mother, without meaning to. I was down on my knees, pulling the old trim off the pantry doorway, getting ready to replace a length of it that had swelled and split. And there, on the inside of the frame, where 20 years of a shut door had hidden it, was the ladder of pencil marks. Our heights. Every birthday, Emily and Wes climbing up the wood in my mother's careful hand, her little dates penciled in beside each line. My father had painted that kitchen twice since we lost her. I would have bet the house on it. And both times, he had cut in around that door frame with a brush rather than lose one mark of her. I did not replace that piece of trim. I planed the split smooth, and I oiled it, and I left every line exactly where she had drawn it. That is the one repair I made all summer that I made by not fixing a thing. One afternoon, I drove out to see old Vernon Pruitt. He'd taught shop class at the county high school for 30 years, and he was the first person outside my own family who ever told me I had the touch, back when I was a skinny girl who felt like she didn't fit anywhere. He's the reason I do what I do. I found him on his own porch out past the fairgrounds, 90 now, hands knotted up with arthritis. And when I told him what I'd made of the touch he first saw, that I saved old buildings, that I'd led a courthouse restoration and a whole historic church, The old man's chin trembled, and he had to look off at his yard for a minute. "I knew it," he finally said. "I always knew it'd be you." "Now who," he said, turning back, fierce, "is going to look after our steeple, if not the girl I taught?" I should tell you about the steeple. The First Baptist Church at the end of Main Street, the little white one on the rise where we'd buried my mother, was falling down. Not the whole church, but the steeple, the tall white finger of it that you could see from anywhere in the valley, that had pointed up over Cedar Gap for 130 years. Water had gotten into the framing. The congregation had gotten estimates from a firm down in Atlanta that would have cost more than the church took in over 3 years. And they'd about resigned themselves to taking it down, to letting the skyline of the only town I'd ever loved lose the one line that made it itself. And I was standing right there. A woman who does exactly this, who had come home by accident at the exact moment her hometown needed the one specific thing she'd spent her whole life learning how to do. I want to be careful here, because life is not usually that tidy, and I, of all people, distrust a story that ties itself up too neat. But sometimes the timing is just grace, and you can either name it that or waste it. And I was done wasting things. I told the preacher I'd do the steeple, at cost. I'd bring my own crew down and put them up in town, and I'd give Cedar Gap its skyline back, and I'd do it right. And I'd do it for the town that had spent 20 years being kinder to me than I'd had any idea. I got into the habit, those weeks, of taking my coffee at the Bluebird in the mornings before the heat came up. I'd sit at the counter and Miss Dot would fuss at me, and the same handful of old men would be in the same corner booth solving the world's problems over their eggs. And one by one, they folded me back in like I had never been gone. Nobody made a production of it. Nobody said, "Welcome home, isn't it something?" They just started saving me the end stool and asking my opinion on the church steeple and complaining to me about the weather, which is the highest honor a town like that can pay a person, letting you be ordinary again. I had not known how badly I'd missed being ordinary somewhere. In the city, I was good. In Cedar Gap, I was just Roy's girl, home. And it turned out that was the very thing I'd been starving for the whole time and calling it something else. The summer found a rhythm, the way summers used to before I filled mine with deadlines. Mornings I worked on the house in the cool. Evenings I sat on the swing with whoever came by. The steeple job started up, and my crew drove down from Savannah and promptly fell in love with the Bluebird's pie, and the good sound of hammers came off the church rise all through July. Thunderstorms rolled in over the mountains most afternoons, quick and violent and clean, and after them the whole valley would steam and shine, and the tree frogs would tune up in the dusk. For 20 years, I had measured my life in invoices and airport gates. Here it was measured in suppers and storms and the long gold length of the evenings, and something in me that had been wound too tight for far too long was finally, quietly, starting to unspool. I went up the hill behind the church one evening to see my mother. I had not stood at her grave in 20 years. I'd been afraid of it the way I was afraid of all of it, and it turned out to be only a quiet place with good light. Somebody kept it up. There were fresh coreopsis in the little vase, the orange kind she loved, and I knew without asking that my father drove up and set them there, the way he must have every week for 20 years, while I told myself 300 miles off that I could not face it. I sat down in the grass beside her and told her about the buildings I'd saved. I told her I finally understood the promise she had made him make. I told her I was home, and that the steeple she lay in the shadow of would stand another 100 years, because her girl knew how to save it. The light went long and gold, and then blue. The first stars pricked out over the ridge, and it was the most peace I had felt in half my life. Things loosened between Wes and me that summer too, and I don't want to skip it because it wasn't nothing. There'd been a hardness in him under the welcome, and it was fair, and it finally came out one night on the tailgate of his truck with a couple of beers between us. He said he'd been angry at me for years. That while I was off saving famous buildings and getting my picture in the paper, he was the one who drove Dad to his knee surgery and sat with him at Christmas and noticed him getting old. That it hadn't seemed fair, me getting to be the one who left, and still getting to be the golden one Dad bragged about. And the worst part, Wes said, staring at his beer, is I couldn't even really be mad. Because he made you sound so good, I halfway missed you too. I didn't defend myself. There wasn't any defense, and offering one would have been an insult. I just told him he was right. All of it was right. And that I was sorry. Plainly. No softening. I told him he'd done the thing I was too much of a coward to do, which was to stay and love our father up close. The hard kind of loving, the kind with knee surgeries in it. And I told him I wasn't here to take the golden spot back and disappear again. That I was buying a little place, keeping a foot planted here for good. Wes was quiet a long time. Then he knocked his bottle against mine, and that was that. The way it is with brothers. He'd kept my note, too. I found it by accident, cleaning out the kitchen drawer that had jammed. The one full of dead batteries and rubber bands and takeout menus that every house seems to grow. There it was, gone soft as cloth from 20 years of folding, my own 19-year-old handwriting. It did not say much. It said I was sorry, and that I had to go, and that I loved him, and that I would call when I could. I had written it in 4 minutes in the dark with a bus to catch. My father had carried it in the junk drawer of his life for 2 decades, close enough to lay a hand on every single day. When I asked him about it, gentle, that evening, he only said, "It is the last thing you ever wrote me from this house." Where was I going to put a thing like that? And he took it back from me and folded it up and set it right back in the drawer where it lived. The living warmth of that whole summer, the thing that finally cracked me all the way open, was a girl of 6 years old. Wes's daughter. My niece, Grace, who I had never met, who had been told she had an Aunt Emily, who fixes the most beautiful old buildings in the whole world, and who therefore decided the very first day that I hung the moon. She'd climb up in the swing next to her granddaddy and pepper me with questions while I worked. She started calling the paint scraper the magic knife. One evening she fell asleep against my side on that porch swing with fireflies coming up out of the grass, and my father looked over at the two of us with an expression I'll carry to my own grave. And I understood that this, right here, was the thing 20 years had cost. Not buildings. This. The real conversation with my father came in August, on the swing, at dusk, the way I'd known it would have to. The cicadas were winding down and the light was doing that long, gold Georgia thing it does. And Grace was inside with her mama, and it was just the two of us and the sweat on 2 glasses of tea. I finally asked him. I said, "Daddy, Miss Dot told me what you told everybody, all those years, that you sent me." And he was quiet, pushing the swing with the toe of his boot, and then he said, "Well, it was mostly true." "Mostly," I said, and I heard the word come out of me small, a girl's word, the kind you use when you already sense the next thing said is going to rearrange you. He did not answer right off. The swing chains ticked, and a whippoorwill started up somewhere down toward the creek, and my father took his time, the way he always did with the things that mattered most. "Your mama," he said, and his voice went careful the way it did around her even now. "Your mama, at the end, when it was just her and me in that room at night, she made me promise her something. She was more scared of one thing than she was of dying, Emily, and it wasn't leaving me. It was you. She said, 'Roy, that girl will stay. She'll stay in this house and turn herself into my nurse, and then into my mourner, and then into your caretaker, and she'll wake up 50 years old having never once left this valley, and it will be my fault.'" He stopped. Pushed the swing. "She made me promise I'd push you out, that I would not let my own grief become a rope around your ankle. She made me promise before she'd let go. I was crying by then, the quiet kind, and he reached over without looking and took my hand the way he had when I was small. "So when you left," he said, "the way you did, that note under the sugar bowl, that bus in the dark. Emily, I did not feel left. I want you to hear me. I felt like I'd kept the last promise I ever made to your mother. You did the thing she needed you to do, and you didn't even know you were doing it. And every day you were down there living, I was up here keeping the promise. That's not abandonment, sugar. I don't know what the word is, but it isn't that." "Then why the swing?" I said. "You built this after she died," Miss Dot said. 20 years you kept my room. 20 years you framed my work and never told me. If you were so at peace with me gone, Daddy, why keep all of it ready?" And my father, 70 years old, looked out at the yard where his wife's garden used to be and said the truest thing anybody's ever said to me. "Because keeping a promise and missing you," he said, "were never two different things. I could want you gone and living and want you home in the same breath. That's just what it is to love somebody, Em. You send them out the door with your whole heart, and then you oil the swing, in case." We sat out there until the stars came up over the pecan trees. I've restored a lot of broken things in my life, and I know the moment when a thing you thought was past saving turns out to have had good bones under the damage the whole time. That's what that porch felt like. Not a thing fixed, a thing revealed to have been sound all along, just waiting on somebody with the eyes to see it. I finished the steeple that fall. My crew came down, and we cut out the rotten framing, and we set new heart pine. And on a cold, bright morning in October, the whole town stood on the church rise and watched us raise the restored spire back up over Cedar Gap, white and true, pointing the way it had pointed over my mother's grave and her mother's before her. Miss Dot cried. Vernon Pruitt was there in a folding chair with a blanket over his knees, and when it went up, he lifted one arthritic hand off the armrest like he was blessing it. Or maybe blessing me, I couldn't tell. And I decided it didn't matter which. Here's what happened after, since I promised you it ends kind. I did buy the little place, a cottage 2 streets over from my father, and I split my days now between Savannah and Cedar Gap. And it turns out you can save old courthouses from either end of a highway if you love the work enough to drive. My father is 71 now and still opens the store 6 days a week, and the framed courthouse still hangs by his register, except now there's a second frame beside it, of the steeple, and he tells everybody about that one too. Biscuit, the old yellow dog, finally passed in his sleep in his sunny spot, and Wes brought home a fool of a puppy the kids named Waffle, and the store has a dog again, the way it always will. Grace is 7 and calls my cottage her second house and knows the names of more tools than most grown men. Wes and I have Sunday supper with Dad every week I'm in town, and some weeks I'm not, and that's all right too, because the not coming isn't a wall anymore, it's just a Tuesday. And that porch swing my father built out of grief and hope 20 years ago, the one he kept oiled for a girl who took 2 decades to sit in it, gets used every single evening now. Some nights it's Dad and Grace. Some nights it's Wes and me with a couple of beers. Some nights it's all of us, and the fireflies come up, and my mother's absence sits down easy among us like one more member of the family who just stepped out for a minute. I drove 300 miles that June, braced for a punishment that had never once existed, built by a whole town of quiet people out of nothing but kindness, and kept from me for 20 years by a father who loved me too well to let me carry the truth of how much it cost him. If you'd told the woman gripping that steering wheel that the town she ran from had spent 2 decades keeping her seat warm, she'd have laughed at you. And then she'd have cried. And then, if she had any sense at all, she'd have driven faster. It's never too late to sit down on the swing. That's the whole of what I learned. The bell over the door remembers your note, and the swing stays oiled a lot longer than shame lets you believe. So wherever you are tonight, if there's a door somewhere behind you that you left swinging, a person, a place, A hometown you're sure has filed you away under your worst day. Let me tell you what my daddy taught me on that swing. You might have the whole story wrong. The people who love you are often carrying you far more gently than you'd ever dare to hope, telling a kinder version of you to anyone who'll listen, keeping a room dusted, keeping a swing oiled, just in case. You don't have to fix it all tonight. You just have to stop believing the harshest version. That's enough to fall asleep on. Rest easy now. Let your hands go loose. Let the day finish drifting off down the road. And let that be the thought you carry down into sleep. That somewhere a swing is still moving slow, and a seat is still warm. And it is not too late, and it never was. Sleep well. I'll be right here, and I'll see you in the next one. Before you go all the way under, I'd love to hear from you. So if this one found you at the right time, leave a little something in the comments. Tell me this, is there a hometown or a person you've stayed away from too long? And what's the one thing that would make you finally drive back? And I'm always curious who I'm keeping company with at this hour. So tell me what state you're listening from and how old you are, and I'll read every one. Good night.